Welcome everyone to our first focused webinar of 2022 that Sci-ROI Global is organizing. Sci-ROI, in short, for Science and Research Opportunities in India, a volunteer-driven nonprofit organization that was founded by Professor Asim Ansari and Winstep Forward in 2015 with the mission to create awareness and aid in smooth transition of Indian STEM diaspora back to India. Sci-ROI provides a platform for promoting multi-level collaborative initiatives between individuals and agencies in India and abroad that leverage the strength of both the nations and facilitate the pursuance of a STEM career in India. Our annual events, recruitment drives, newsletters, blogs, focused webinars like today's highlight the diversity of prospects in India. So during our flagship event last year, which is our annual event that happens every year in September or October, a topic that kept recurring is the importance of academia, industry, and nonprofit coming together to achieve mutually beneficial outcomes, especially on a global scale. With the world becoming more connected over the last couple of years, global and local cross-sector collaborations are becoming easier to initiate and sustain. Our member base, that is Indian STEM diaspora, graduate student, postdocs, and early career researchers residing abroad, they have always been inquisitive about contributing to the Indian STEM economy in any way possible. So today, we bring this webinar to you on local and global perspectives of academia-industry collaborations in the hope that it will satisfy your queries about the current scenario in India, how you can initiate and sustain such collaborations from abroad, and how to obtain funding and mentorship opportunities for the same. We have three esteemed panelists joining us today who have decades of experience at the interface of industry and academia in India between them. And Sci-ROI Global team is humbled by the chance of discussing such a crucial topic with them. For the next 2 hours, the moderators for today, Dr. Abhijit Banik and Dr. Bhashwati Sengupta from Sci-ROI leadership team will take you through stimulating conversations with our panelists, Dr. Vasan, Dr. Dineshkumar, and Dr. Ramaswamy. We'll first invite Dr. Vasan to go through his career journey with experiences in initiating industry-academia collaborations and tips and tricks that he would like to pass on to the next generation for formulating such collaborations. Our audience then will have a chance of interacting with the panelists during the panel discussion by posting their questions in the chat box or joining the breakout rooms that follows this panel discussion where they can interact directly one-on-one with the individual panelists. We request all our audience to please keep yourself muted while we are having the live talk and the panel discussion, and to post your questions or any discussion related topics in the chat box. So without further ado, let us start the proceedings for today. It is my great pleasure and honor to introduce Dr. Vasan Sambandamurthy for his talk. Dr. Vasan Sambandamurthy is currently the Senior Vice President for Global Operations at Bugverse, Bangalore. This is a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company that is developing novel therapies against infectious diseases and cancer. He also headed DBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance as the CEO during 2020-2021 period. He has over 20 years of experience in vaccine and drug discovery, spanning leadership positions at global corporations like Novartis, AstraZeneca, Syngene, and Biocon Limited. Dr. Vasan was a Howard Hughes Medical Institute, that is HHMI fellow, at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York, and did his doctoral studies at the Tuberculosis Research Center, a part of the ICMR in Chennai. Soon after his postdoc, he transitioned from academia to industry. A highly productive stint in the pharmaceutical company industry provided an excellent platform to convert innovative ideas into affordable, life-saving products for a variety of diseases in collaboration with academia and industrial partners. Today, Dr. Vasan brings to you an unmatched bag full of experience to build further for your collaborations. So I welcome Dr. Vasan to give us a brief talk on his career journey and the experience from academia industry partnerships that you have developed in Indian ecosystem. Welcome, Dr. Vasan.
Thank you so much, Manali, for that wonderful introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants wherever you are. And a big hello to my co-panelists, Dinesh and Rams. And first, at the outset, thank you so much, Avjeet, for this opportunity, and also Dr. Rasim for giving me this platform to share my journey of, where I started and how I went abroad, trained, and then where I am now. And really, it's going to be more like a reflection, and I really would encourage that we subsequently pick up some points or discussion. Just let me know if I'm able to share my share. Yeah, is my screen visible?
Yes.
Excellent. So I start with the statement that life is a journey, not a destination, which you will realize after 15 minutes, why is this so? So, why is this not moving? Okay, there you go. So I'm just going to quickly tell you the places where I've been. And I'm probably my first generation. In my family, I'm the first generation going to college. My parents just stopped with high school. So it's a great opportunity. I ended up in Jipma, Pondicherry. Only this evening, I realized that it's an institution which is almost 200 years old, set up in 1823. So what I really learned during this undergrad training is the power of an institution, the campus life, real world experience, and also an early exposure to research, that inquiring, how to ask questions. So that kind of a thing started in Jipma. Then subsequently, I moved on to I got fascinated in microbiology. So Christian Medical College, Vellore, as all of you know, is again a 120-year-old institution, which really is focused on human services, service to the community. And this is a great place. I had 3 years, then I worked 1 year as a microbiologist at CMC. What I learned here is the value for human life and real hands-on training. So this, I think, is a remarkable experience and exposure in terms of being able to do experiments with hand, unlike a lot of other programs. So this is something which really set the foundation for me to subsequently move on in my career. So it's very important to really reflect on some of the key players, I call the mentors, who really have had a significant impact and shaped up who I am today. One such person is Dr. Sridharan, who's no more. He's a phenomenal world-class microbiologist, a walking encyclopedia. He really inculcated or probably built or strengthened my curiosity for science, and also played an important role in establishing and reiterating the importance of ethics, integrity, and also the art of writing. Then I moved on to do my PhD. So I was at the crossroads. Should I go abroad for a PhD? Should I stay back in India? For whatever reason, I realized that I should stay back in India, do my PhD, and then go abroad for my postdoc. So I joined for a PhD at the Tuberculosis Research Center, which again is a very old institution. It's the largest institution under the Indian Council for Medical Research, ICMR. So a very good exposure from up. So Jipma being a government agency, CMC is private, moving on to another government agency where I pursued my PhD. Here again, I had probably the life-changing experience of working with this gentleman here, whose name is Dr. P.R. Narayanan, who was the director of TB Research Center. He really again strengthened, the scientific curiosity, and he was a living example of honesty and integrity, someone at that high level. Again, learned a lot of things around strategy, managing people, and he always believed in the power of collaboration, which again were all very, very strong fundamentals which really helped my career. After this, so this was a dream of mine to join Bill Jacobs, who's a HHMI investigator at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, Bronx, New York. Just to check, am I audible and I'm still connected?
Yes, Dr. Vasan.
Yes, yeah. Great. So I had a fabulous time of close to 4.5 years with Bill. And Bill was a maverick. He really was he did transformative science in terms of coming up with new technologies and really spearheaded some fundamental changes in the way we do microbacterial research. So he really inculcated the quality or attribute of how to dream big. Being a HHMI guy, needless to say, the connections were enormous. Anything and everything. By the time you clone something and you have something, it's already the clone has gone to a partner with complementary skills. He also taught the power of persistence and perseverance. And I worked with mycobacteria. Some of you who are in the field of mycobacteria understand it's a very frustrating pathogen, very slow grower. It takes a month to get a colony, 3 weeks to get a colony. Typically, most of the animal experiments run for almost a year or so. So I did some wonderful work, cutting edge work in Bill's lab, trying to develop certain live attenuated mutants of Mycobacterium tuberculosis as vaccines. Got a lot of publications, really high impact publications, patents, as well as had the opportunity to be a part of PO1 and RO1 grants. Also an opportunity to be at the annual HHMI conclave, where you really get to rub shoulders with some of the Nobel laureates as well as potential Nobel laureates. I had a fantastic exposure. So in 2004, I was at the crossroads again. What do I do? Should I pursue my research in academia or should I move to industry? What I realized is I'm not someone who could sit independently in a lab and work. I always saw the power to leverage someone else's strength and look at complementarity of someone's expertise. How can we? So I really saw that opportunity to move to the industry. So that took me to the Novartis Institute for Tropical Disease, which had actually set up an R&D facility in Singapore, a beautiful country, to work on neglected diseases, primarily TB and dengue. So 4 years at Novartis was phenomenal. It really made me graduate from an academic researcher to someone moving to the industry and really experiencing the power of big pharma network. And also primarily the way Novartis was set up was to really say that we will work on collaborating with academia. All the basic biology, all the target validation biology that happens in the TB field will be leveraged from the academic partners. And Novartis will really push them forward using medicinal chemistry, pharmacology, and the entire plethora of drug discovery capabilities that were very strong in Novartis. And I also had an exposure to further strengthen my belief and intent that interdisciplinary research is what makes things work. And that's what quickly takes an idea to a product and eventually to needy patients. And I also had the first exposure to deal with people management. Contrary to a lot of belief, people say, oh, industry's job is very monotonous. You really don't get to do cutting edge science. The answer is not right. So it's a living example that at Novartis, I managed to publish, as part of collaborative teams, managed to publish high quality publications. The one you're seeing on the left was published in Angewon Chemie with an impact factor of around 13, 14, then a couple of others coming up. So it again opened up an opportunity to do good science, dynamic science, focused science, where everything was moving towards delivering a product for TB patients. Again, key highlights from the short industrial stint was being a project leader, driving collaborations across the globe. So we had teams in Switzerland, in Boston, in La Jolla, San Diego, as well as we were part of a Gates consortium, which involved over a dozen academic partners. So learning the threads of partnership, what makes a partnership click, what are the secret ingredients of a successful partnership, all the things I learned. Most importantly, also learn to manage a team, line manager. Then after almost 9 years abroad, there was always this home calling, right? Very appropriate to this diaspora here in terms of a decision, what is the right time to move back to India? Or should I continue in the US or should I continue overseas? So I took a very bold decision to move back to AstraZeneca, again, to continue my research journey in the field of tuberculosis. So AstraZeneca, like Novartis, was running an R&D program, a very strong R&D program, trying to discover new drugs for TB. So in AstraZeneca, based on the initial experience from Novartis, I could actually move more into clinical development. So I was extremely privileged to work with a global team of scientists from different backgrounds again, we are part of international consortium. So to give an example, AstraZeneca was part of the European Union Framework 6, Framework 7 program to really discover novel drugs. This involved over 24 academic partners, and we were the only industrial partner. So again, a lot of publications, grant writing, and also finessing the skills around program management. As you could see here, this is a molecule which went into phase 2A in TB patients in South Africa. So I had the privilege of being part of a project team which took a molecule developed from Bangalore all the way into patients. So that again, a very, very humbling moment. 6 years at AstraZeneca, the last 2 years, AstraZeneca saw a need to move into malaria. So having branded as a guy who only worked on TB for over 20 years, saying that you are too specialist, you are too much into your comfort zone, I took the opportunity to move to a malaria project. So I was a program leader. So this is a very novel series called Triangularpyrimidine, which was published in Nature Communication 2015. And what you see on the right side is a cover article. Sometimes good works gets into press. And then two of my colleagues the three of us were the key players in this project. If time permits, I'll come and quickly tell you how the ecosystem of a funder, an industry partner, an academic partner can really come together, converge, and really make magic and wonderful things happen. So then after AstraZeneca, around 2014, AstraZeneca decided to shut the R&D for strategic reasons. So I was left with an opportunity to move to another area. So I was extremely lucky to have a stint at Biocon, a large biopharmaceutical company based out of Bangalore. So I put the tag there. I moved from a specialist, a TB or a malaria specialist, to a generalist. A very, very significant transition in my career, wherein I had to work on newer areas, which includes inflammation, diabetes, oncology, autoimmunity, and I still continued my passion around infectious disease, setting up a lab to do some hospital-acquired infection studies and genomics around it. So clearly an opportunity to step out of one's comfort zone. It was a bit nervous, but as you'll see subsequently, I saw it as an opportunity. And then the beauty of this was I had the extraordinary privilege of working on monoclonal antibodies, small interfering RNA therapeutics for the first time in India. Sitting in a small company in Bangalore, I could work on something that's really cutting edge on some areas like lung transplantation, working on an orphan eye disease. Then I also had the privilege to work on an oral insulin project, which went into phase 2, phase 3 in India. So Biocon clearly taught me in terms of being able to forge business partnerships, how to influence without power, because I was head of the program management team. No one reports to you, which means they will say, why should I listen to you? So learning the art of influencing without power is a very important skill, which comes very handy as you progress in your career. And again, this is just a picture with Kiran. She's a terrific leader. And all the quotes you see on the left side of the screen is very carefully chosen for each of the people who have had a significant impact on my career and my, wherever I am today. So she's again a terrific person, a visionary, and a truly transformative leader. So then this was COVID time. I was really asking myself. So I also had an opportunity in Biocon to take one of the novel antibodies which target CD6 for emergency use authorization to treat cytokine release syndrome in COVID patients. So that pretty much completed the cycle of discovery development, all the way from ideating on the table, taking it into preclinical development, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and something to the clinic. Then came this opportunity, an exciting opportunity to be a part of a very progressive funding agency called India Alliance. This was a partnership between Department of Biotechnology, Government of India, and Wellcome Trust. And this looked very attractive to me because this provided a much larger canvas to apply all the learnings, both from India, having worked abroad, working in the big pharma, and moving on to working in an affordable healthcare biopharma company like Biocon, to really see, can I make a difference? So the key learnings from India Alliance stint, a short stint of 13 months, was how to be a responsive funder. How do you connect science with society? And also, how do you continue to nurture a scientific ecosystem, which involves early career researchers like many of you here, funders, policymakers, public health advocates, uh, legal, finance, all put together, and how do you continue to catalyze innovation? So again, a terrific innings. After spending 13 months, again, this curiosity to get back to drug discovery and work with real data pushed me to step out of India Alliance and then continue my journey at Bugworks, which is a clinical stage startup, like it was announced in the beginning. And Bugworks was founded by some of my colleagues at AstraZeneca, and we work on infection and oncology. Maybe that's a story on another day. So I'm just looking at the clock. In another couple of minutes, I will just walk you through the secret ingredients of a successful industry-academia partnerships. I've just deliberately put this as key enablers. One is creating an ideal environment or a conducive environment. Identifying the stakeholders, the funders play a very important role. The industrial partner, the academic partners all play a very important role. The first thing is the convergence of like-minded people with a common purpose, driven by purpose, saying that we need to do this is what really becomes very important. And of course comes this huge mountain to climb on the right side, which is all the work around confidentiality, because for the industry, it's all about confidentiality, IP discussion. For academia, it's about publication. So gone are those days, if you really look at how did we, and as a humanity, how did we respond to the COVID, was primarily because of the ability for people to shed the differences and really work towards making meaningful contributions and success. And this part on the right, what you're seeing here, is no more a big challenge. All you do is let the top guys talk about it, they'll fix it. And as scientists on the bench or people who have ideas, thought leaders, they should go with an open mind and clearly agree on roles and objectives of this partnership. Be it 2 partners, be it a dozen partners or 2 dozen partners. It's very important to have clarity and also at every point in time have a mechanism, a governance mechanism involving some of the key people and trying to retain transparency and trust and learn as the journey progresses. You start off with something, it's always good to pause every 6 months, 1 year to really look at how things are going, what is going well, which we should retain, what is not going well, which we should focus on. So this probably summarizes some of the key recipes of what makes a successful partnership in academia and industry click. So time permits, another 2 to 3 minutes. I'll talk to you an example of a live example of how partners from academia, industry, private funding organizations, as well as government agencies came together in a collaborative network to really make a meaningful difference in the field of malaria. In the industry, we had 3 partners, AstraZeneca, GlaxoSmithKline, Vision, Zydus Cadila. Academia, we had partners from Australia. We had collaborators in Harvard, Columbia, government agency, CCAMP in Bangalore, which provided access to some cutting edge technology. National Institute of Malaria Research also helped us with some of the early assays. And MME was a key funder, which really enabled this partnership, stitched the whole thing. So this is the story of the molecule I spoke about. Let me go back here. This is the Triangularpyrimidine, which started off as a screen happening in Australia. The core science synthesis happened in India with a lot of CROs. A lot of biological assays was built by MME as part of this major network. All the assays we could access sitting in Bangalore. And we worked with all the partners. This publication has 47 authors, clearly showing that it is possible to really come up with very, very productive collaborations. And then it so happened that despite setbacks, in 2014, as I mentioned, Astra shut its door and AstraZeneca passed on the asset back to MMV. This was the molecule which was nominated for clinical development. And MMV, in turn, was very successful in finding a partner in Zydus Cadila, an Indian pharma company. And Zydus and MMV worked together, took the molecule, took the baby into clinical development. And as we speak, early last month, they published this in Lancet Infectious Disease, where they completed a phase 1 trial and established that the mechanism of action is very novel. This molecule has the legs to go into phase 2 and phase 3, eventually to patients in the form of a cocktail. So that was something very nice. And yeah, another 2 more minutes. So this is all science journey. It's all about meeting people, learning different perspectives, understanding, imbibing, and appreciating the beauty in diversity, both from culture, in terms of language, in terms of food, in terms of science, in terms of thinking, all put together. And this one clearly summarizes where I am today. We all get the exact 365 days. The only difference is what we do with them. We learn from yesterday, live for today, hope for tomorrow. That's why I said life is a journey and not a destination. And you have to have lots of fun, right? And India is a beautiful country. Those of you who are considering to come back, I can just guarantee you that as you will hear the subsequent panel discussion, you will see that the landscape is changing. And the government is very keen to put in a lot of money into research, really inviting top-class scientists to come back, establish. And our own, one of the coordinators here, Avijit, right? He recently moved back and he's doing really well. I can see him is very happy. So India is a fabulous country. You will have your own doubts, and fears, apprehensions, but just hey, go for it. It's a journey, and I'm sure you will all do very well. Thank you so much. Before I end, I would just like to say that in the next panel discussion, you will see that we'll touch upon some key topics of the funding landscape, how is it changing, and the convergence of like-minded people coming together. We're also looking at how government is playing a very influential role as an enabler, and also the ecosystem, the so-called ecosystem, biotech ecosystem, or the research ecosystem across STEM has picked up this appetite for taking risk, which I think is really nice for someone who's keen to pursue cutting edge, really transformative science. So I'll stop here again. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'll be happy to take any questions if you have, or we can do it during our interaction. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vasan, for such a stimulating talk. I'm sure the audience will surely be benefited from your insights. Hello, everyone. Myself, Bhashwati Sengupta, postdoctoral fellow at Penn State University, USA. I'll be moderating today's session with my colleague in Sci-ROI, Dr. Abhijit Banik, who is an associate professor at Geetham University in Visakhapatnam, India. At first, I'd like to introduce our panelists for the day. You have already heard about Vasan from Manali. Our second panelist is Dr. Ramaswamy Subramanian. He's a professor of biological sciences and biomedical engineering at Purdue University, USA. Dr. Ramaswamy earned his PhD in molecular biosciences from IISc Bangalore. After graduation, he moved to Uppsala for a fellowship at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. Dr. Ramaswamy then moved as a faculty at the University of Iowa. While working as Assistant Dean and Director of Core Research Facilities in Iowa, Dr. Ramaswamy helped to create the university's structural biology program, an accomplishment he later duplicated in STEM in India. He was the founding dean of INSTEM. He also co-founded and served as the first CEO of the Center for Cellular and Molecular Platforms, also known as CCAMP, a life sciences innovation hub for academia, industry, and startup ventures. Welcome, Dr. Subramanian. We also have Dr. Dineshkumar Harursampath with us. Dr. Dineshkumar is the founder head of Nonlinear Multifunctional Composites Analysis and Design Lab, which is in short known as NMCAD Lab, and the faculty member of Department of Aerospace Engineering at IISc Bangalore. He obtained his PhD in aerospace engineering from Georgia Tech, USA. He, along with his student and alumni-led team called Multifund at NMCAD, received major global honors at UNESCO Airbus Biennial Innovation Challenge, Fly Your Ideas, at Hamburg, Germany in 2015. Currently, he has multiple fundings and recognitions from national and international agencies, and his lab at NMCAD focuses on model geometric and physical nonlinearities, as well as their evolutionary interaction in conventional and multifunctional composites for aerospace and non-aerospace applications. Welcome, Dr. Dineshkumar. Now, I'll give it over to Abhijit for starting the panel discussion. Abhijit?
Thank you, Vashwati. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, great. First of all, a warm welcome to all our panelists. Thank you very much for giving us your valuable time. And I assure to all of our attendees today, it is going to be a very engaging discussion. Along with Dr. Ramaswamy, Dr. Dineshkumar, and Dr. Vasan, we do have Dr. Asim as well from Sci-ROI, who also will be joining as a panel. And it will be great to hear from his perspective as well from this important topic of academia industry collaboration. So maybe to stimulate further our audience, Manali, if you could just walk through a poll what we have set up for our audience with the questions like, what do you think are the major challenges in initiating academic and industry collaborations? And those are your responses. Just go for it. So while we go through it, maybe just wait for a minute to look at it, and eventually we'll start with our discussion. So today's discussion, we have actually dissected into 4 different parts, which are academia industry collaboration, then opportunities for the Indian diaspora from outside to collaborate with Indian industry and academia, and role of funding agencies in initiating or formulating such collaborations, and also role of academic and industry in grooming next generation workforce. So we'll start with the first set of questions for the first topic, which is the academia industry collaboration pros and cons. So we all know how critical cross-sector collaborations are to take a product from conceptualization to the market. And as experienced in this field, we would like to hear from our panel about the advice you want to give to our audience for successfully initiating and sustaining such collaborations, and what are the mistakes you would strictly avoid in those formulations. So maybe we'll start with Dr. Ramaswamy. If you are here, maybe you can give a shot to this, and then probably we'll go to the next panelist.
Hi, that's a very, very broad question, and I will try and answer. But before that, thank you for this invitation. And I think this is the 3rd year in a row I'm doing. I hope the audience is different, or they're going to get bored with the same spiel I give every time. So I apologize for those of you who have been here before. I'm going to start the reverse way to answer the question. Currently, my lab is fully funded by an industry grant. My lab is fully funded by a grant from a company called Elanco Animal Healthcare, which, for those of you who don't know, is the largest animal healthcare company in the world with a revenue of over $3 billion a year. Okay. The nice thing about working with them is I'm constantly in touch with them. We meet every 2 weeks, every month, and every 2 weeks we send them a report, and we talk every month once for exactly 30 minutes. And these are very structured meetings. And the nice thing is they give me also input in science. I spent a large amount of my time also working with grants from the NIH and NSF. They give you money. They don't give you anything else. Here, it's a collaboration, and there is a goal, and there is success. So it's really motivating to work in an environment like that. But for this to successfully work, academics have to get away from a very, very fundamental mindset that they have, that somehow it is people who fail in academia who go to industry. I mean, that's a very poor mindset. I have only 2 of my graduate students who have gone on to be in academia. The rest are all in industry, all kinds of industry, from finance industry to pharma to other biotech to startups. And I can tell you they're all equally smart. So don't make the mistake ever that your professor tells you. Asim and I are 2 people with professor titles here, and I say this as a joke every time. The qualification to be a professor is you need 1 F for a fool and 2 S for an ass. So don't trust them in these decisions. Industry scientists are as smart. They're very focused. They're very good. Do not underestimate them. If you make that mistake, you will feel in any industry academia collaboration. I'll stop and let others also get a chance to answer.
Thanks, Dr. Rams. So maybe would like to hear Dr. Dineshkumar, your take on this.
Sure. Thanks for the question, Abhijit. So before that, warm greetings to everyone. In fact, this is becoming a more universally valid opening remark these days because good morning and good evening could be different for different people for a global audience working from different time zones. So to make it season-free too, I can drop the word warm and merely say greetings to everybody. Still retaining the warmth, but this time in the heart. So that's an ode to a biologically inclined expert panel. Wonderful listening to Vasan earlier on, and now for the opening remarks of Rams. And of course, an ode to us warm-blooded creatures as well. Even in a steadily hotting up Indian spring, edging on summer as of now, my biologist co-panelists can probably tell you more precisely. But irrespective of our educational and professional backgrounds, all of us are at least knowledgeable, if not consciously aware, of the fact that the very organism that we refer to as our body is actually a colony of 39 trillion microorganisms and just 30 trillion human cells. And there's a reason why I'm telling this in context of this particular question, because these 39 plus 30, 69 trillion entities collectively constitute towards who we think we are. So moreover, about 1 million cells die and 1 million new ones are generated every moment. Now, same is the case with academic and industrial institutions, which are essentially organisms. If you understand it in that way, many of the things that seem very complex to us can be very easily understood. And the pros and cons that Avijit just asked about can be very easily addressed. And in fact, the cons can be turned on their face into pros. So in these organisms, whether you talk about the academia or the, let's say, the industry, there's frequent ingress and egress, right, at various levels for various reasons. So contributing in no small measure towards their evolution. And yet each of these institutions maintains its integrity, right, and reputation too. Just like how we individuals do, our cells come and go, but we maintain that individuality. And same is the case with these two entities we are trying to bring together, or we are trying to see how, if they're already together, how we can ensure that that relationship is sustained. The only difference between what's happening in our bodies and what's happening outside is that our bodies are microbiomes, while our institutions are what I call macrobiomes. So many aspects applicable to our physical body, even our emotional mind, our intellectual bodies, rather microbiomes are applicable with a very small, slight bit of adaptation to academia and industry too. So almost as if they were kind of living and thriving entities looking for companionship. Now, it's not surprising then that an industry literally refers to an effort that's attentive, diligent, and persistent, while academia means advanced learning, right? I mean, that's how we say a particular person is an academic, or we use the word industrious, which has the same root as the industry, which essentially means being attentive, diligent, and persistent. So learning fuels effort, and effort fuels learning, right? So in other words, academia fuels the industry, and the industry fuels learning. So there's already an existing relationship, creating a symbiotic relationship between the industry and academia. So much so that they can't in fact live without each other. And haven't we heard this phrase, I can't live without each other, in different contexts as well? Why then do these two, academia and industry, sometimes find it so difficult to live with each other and complain about each other too? Now, that's what we all try to resolve today, along with my co-panelists and the questions, wonderful questions which Avijit is asking, so that we can all contribute our might towards further strengthening this relationship. Because this question about academia-industry relationship and things like that is not new. It's been asked for many decades now. almost ever since industry came into picture, because academia existed probably even before that. Now, the whole idea is that why is it still not working? Things evolve in the industry, things evolve in the academia, and the relationship also has to evolve, and new players who come into the picture have to come up with their say and see how we can do this better for the mutual benefit, of course, of the not just these two entities, industry and academia, but the benefit of the society and the world at large, including, of course, its STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, generalized with a sandwiched A for arts in between E and M. I would call it STEAM instead of just STEM, because you need to expand your horizons, and multidisciplinary nature is part of what Avijit just asked. And multidisciplinary, whether it is research or activities or multidisciplinary, let's say, fields involved products, were very difficult to come up with in the past because of various reasons. The limitations of the tools that we had, whether it is the experimental tools, the brick and bolt stuff, or even the computational tools.
Right. Yeah, I mean, thank you, Dr. Dineshkumar. I mean, let me add another perspective that the question, like the existing discussion, is like, how do you sustain the pace of product development in industry when you are working in collaboration with an academic institute? We do understand that in industry it is always a product driven or maybe an application driven, and how to sustain that pace when you are into this such kind of collaborations. So maybe Dr. Vasan, since you have worked so closely in that interface, I would like to hear first from you on this.
Sure. Yeah, great question again. How do you sustain this partnership? My co-panelists have really sown the grains of what makes it successful. The question is sustainability, right? It's all about addressing a big problem, right? You could have something which is very short term. Those things usually are partnerships for convenience, right? I want to access an assay or something else which is very unique to an academic lab. I can just do like a service and then get back. So those things really don't last. Whereas something like a consortium or something which really has a trajectory for 5 years, right, with clear milestones set and saying that this is what we wish to do. If you don't do this in 1 year, what do we do? How do we do some course correction? 3 years, 5 years. So I think it's all about funding and dreaming big and coming up with problems where we see that it's time which is really going to build that the capabilities and the time which is really going to make things happen. So I would probably talk about funding and then time. And it evolves. The relationship evolves as you go forward. As I said, you pick all those good qualities and try to ignore small things here and there. That's where comes a very strong governance mechanism. As Rams was alluding to, that having this kind of a systematic meeting, which is very focused, no need to talk about introduction in every meeting, right? It's over. You just specifically have a very structured meeting. I think you will see that the successes, the energy and the progress made is substantial.
I'll jump in here. So I've lived both sides of the equation.
Okay.
So for the majority of my life, I've been in academia, still am to some degree. But I had the good fortune of consulting and also starting a company. And I can see the difference. And the point that both Vasan has made and Rams made earlier, I've seen amazingly creative, driven, and insightful individuals in industry. I've seen the same in academia. The cultures are slightly different. There is more team science that I see in industry, and that is coming to academia as well. The bottom line drives industry a little more than it does academia. But when they do come together, they can be synergy or they can be suspicion, right? And so when there's respect for what each brings to the table and clear complementarity, meaning they can bring a system, perhaps a very well-developed, I shouldn't say assay system, but I mean just a way of addressing a problem. And what I have learned over the past few years in watching my company is this degree of corporate discipline that you perhaps don't have in academia, and it's good that you don't. because that enables, so the goals of the two, entities are different. In academia, you're out there, hopefully not worrying about teaching, grants, committee meetings, and all other HR and space-related disasters. When you do have gaps, you get to explore unknown frontiers, and 99.9% of the time you fail in finding something that is of any value. But it is an interesting exercise. It is a way of teaching people how to go about critical thinking, exploring, etc. In industry, by definition, you have a very clear target, often, not always, often, and then you have a path to it. Or if you are successful, you have a path to it. If you're not, then you sort of flounder as well. When those two come together, as I've said earlier, but there's a goal perhaps in the case of Ram's, what he's describing, this real clear synergy. There's something that they both want to achieve. Industry has certain capabilities. Academia he brings his students and creative thinking and the lack of restraint in terms of how to get there. There can be a lot of really interesting things happening. Now in India, what I have found working with colleagues there is there's a high degree of risk averseness. Right? So it was really heartening for me to hear Vasan talk about the growing appetite for risk. That is what is missing in my view, right? In doing really amazing things like Apple, like Google, etc. This does not happen that easily in India. It doesn't happen in most countries in the world. And that's one unusual thing about America, that if we can learn and Indianize, if you will, right? The willingness to take on risk, along with the Indian creativity of jugaad type stuff, right? I think that is where the gap is in my view. And I have only, glancing interactions with industry in India when we talk about collaborations or training of people. But I would love to hear from the panelists if you think that there's additional hidden, if there are additional hidden insights or gaps in our understanding that we could address, so Sci-ROI could step in and do something about.
Dr. Rams,
yeah. So Asim, it's very interesting, right? The differences between academia industry interaction in the US and academia industry interaction in India is very important to address. Cultures are different and the goals are probably not the same. And I have worked on both sides with industry, academia collaborations. One has to realize that the Indian industry is changing very, very quickly. And it's changing much faster than Indian academia. Indian academia, as much as Vasan says the government wants you to come back and give you more money, it's still minuscule, right? $300 million is the budget of DBT. Purdue Life Science budget is $500 million, and Purdue is not at the top 50 life science schools in the US. So you cannot compare. But industry has changed. The amount of money that Bugworks puts into R&D today is significant. It's a startup company in Series B. The amount of money that Biocon and others put in is very large. And the engineering companies, multinational engineering companies are beginning to set up large research centers in India and beginning to collaborate with the Indian academics. So it's changing, the culture is changing in India. But what I want to do is to slightly take a different tact to the same question and say, I would like the focus of that industry academia interaction should be to solve problems for the 5 billion people of the world, right? The focus of the academia interaction in the US or in Europe is to solve the problems of 1 billion people in the world. Whereas if we then create interaction that will solve the problems of the 5 billion people in the world, it will automatically also impact the other 1 billion. So there is a unique opportunity. Now with Indian industry beginning to get more money, generics, I don't know much about engineering. I know a bit of engineering, but I know a lot about the pharma and the generics industry. That was an essential path for Indian industry to generate resources, which now they are beginning to put back into research and developing novel things. So this is the perfect time to be working with the Indian industry. Many of the big hospitals in India were treating patients. And my interaction, for example, with Geetam is they come to me and say, we run a successful hospital. We have so many patients. We are doing all of this now. tell us what we can do to improve our science. So opportunities are just beginning, and I think it's a fantastic time to talk about industry, academia things in India. But I would encourage everybody to see and focus on that 5 billion and not the 1 billion that the US is focusing.
Right. Thanks, Dr. Rams. I mean, maybe we'll try to keep up with the time because we do have other topics to discuss. So I'll give it to Vaswati to carry it forward. But before that, Manali, can you please share the poll result with us? Thank you, Manali. So I'll just quickly read out. So almost 75% of our participants thinks that the information is not adequately spread out, and probably these are the time of the hours we should discuss more about this. And then we do know that these things are already in existence. We do have to reach out to the right people at the right time. And other than that, our panelists already mentioned, they have actually nullified that there are lots of supports around from the academics as well as the industry. So we'll keep it more engaging through our discussion. Vashati, over to you.
Thanks, Abhijit. So as already the poll reflected that we don't have enough information on, how to initiate a collaboration and all. So how about we learn a little more about the opportunities for Indian diaspora from outside to collaborate with Indian academia or industry. So I'll direct this question to Dr. Ramaswamy on how conducive is the current ecosystem for our diaspora to collaborate from outside India with the academic labs or industrial sectors in India? Dr. Ramaswamy?
It's a very good question. The University of, when I was a faculty member, I started my academic career, even though I studied in India, mostly in Sweden and then in the US. And then I was asked to give advice with this question you're asking, how do you collaborate with the Indian diaspora? What should you do? I went to the idea that me in the US, in the West, know more, and the Indian academia and the Indian industry needed my help. I went back to India and spent 10 years. The myth is busted. It's amazing how good they are. Now I look at the collaboration exactly the opposite way, saying that there are tremendous strengths in things that they can do there that I cannot do here. And I'm beginning to look at the collaborations with India as my equals, or actually as drivers, and me being the helper and helping them do all of the technically slightly difficult things which they don't have access to, but the questions are coming from them, the intellectual drive is coming from them, and they're very smart people there, right? This has been very productive. To think about this differently, right? Sorry, to think about this differently, that it's an equal partnership, and often the best questions are coming from there. How can I provide technical help? Then you make a successful collaboration.
Yeah. So how did you, as an when you were an early career researcher, how did you initiate that? What was your first footstep into, initiating it, the collaboration, and how much?
Friends and visiting. I visited India almost twice a year. Till the COVID happened, I spent 10 years in India, but now I have more collaborations. I visit India. I spend a lot of my time in the coffee shops and tea shops and IISc and NCBS and NII and things. I think any collaboration is a personal chemistry that you have to invest in networks and personal chemistry.
Okay. Dr. Dineshkumar, do you want to add something in it? Like what should be the first step?
Yeah, so I think as an early career researcher abroad, you're essentially looking at what is available to you and what you are able to give. So as Rams rightly pointed out, it's the network which really helps over here, because you haven't yet built up your reputation as such for more people to know, not live alone in the country that you live, but in India, which you have left for a while now. So what really sustains is, apart from the friends that Rams mentioned, your earlier professors that you had interacted with, for example, just to give you an idea, the NMCAD lab that I'm part of, we have a very long umbilical cord, I would say, because we are connected with all of our alumni, about a couple of hundred alumni spread across the world. And I always see that even if some of them are very few, rare ones are not in touch with me, I try to find out what they're doing and what new things they're working on. So such a proactive kind of approach from both sides is essential in order to see what new opportunities are evolving, because the window that is available for these opportunities are very small. So you need to capture it at that particular point of time, and that really happens. So you could have joint projects that you could have even joint students. So that's as far as academic labs are concerned. But as far as the industry is concerned, once again, you can look at, for example, MNCs. So in the US, you would have an MNC headquarter, let's say, and it has, let's say, openings in India. Now, to collaborate with that entity in India becomes much easier because you don't have too much of a fund transfer issue in foreign exchange and things like that. So there are ways to work around it. And in fact, the current ecosystem is rapidly improving in making this possible because of the kinds of communication tools that we have today to keep in touch with our former friends, professional friends, and see how we can take it forward.
Okay, so we have a question from the audience. I'll just quickly ask that. With how things are now, at what point in one's research should an academic reach out to an industrial partner? Is it right after the idea is conceived, or is it after the experimental validation of an idea?
I responded already there, but I will repeat. Earlier, the better.
For others, yeah.
Yeah, it's earlier the better. The point is not, you don't need to formally collaborate. My ideas are now more of my ideas become startups because I start talking to people like who are already in companies way earlier. So they allow me to focus the experiment on the type of questions I'm asking that will steer me towards the correct questions that are required for commercial viability rather than just for a publication. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but often publication has no regard for commercial viability, whereas my industry partners told me that's an interesting experiment, but how does it going to help it reach the market? So you don't need to formally collaborate. You need to respect their opinion and start talking to them. The earlier you talk, the better.
Okay, so Vasan, do you want to add something to it?
Sure,
I mean, like how approachable the current ecosystem in India is. Like, if as an individual researcher, someone from abroad like me, if I, being a layman, if I approach an industry and want to ask about my thoughts and everything, are they approachable?
Absolutely, yes. Right. If I can add to what Rams mentioned, just start talking early on. It's like planting the seed. Successful if you nurture it, it's just going to grow, rather than transplanting something which is grown up or a big tree and you transplant. So it's always nice to start early with, again, an open conversation that there's nothing in specific you're looking for. But say this is an idea, and you may have to do this with multiple people, not just with one or two, right? Again, finding that right chemistry and the right fit in terms of, because someone, for example, if you were to talk to Bugworks, right, we only focus on two areas. Mm-hmm. As of now, it's infectious disease and then immuno-oncology. If someone has something pertaining to inflammation, or let's say cardiology, we will hear you out, but at the same time, try to connect you to someone else who's doing. Like there are a lot of other startups within the CCAMP ecosystem, someone working on a different area, which is what is relevant to the question. So we can make those connections. So talk early, keep talking, and talk to many people.
May I quickly jump in here? You touched upon a very interesting thing. As a person who, like Bhashwati sitting out here, right? How does she establish those connections, right? So you would connect, someone who comes to you who might know you through this forum perhaps, to someone else who might do the right thing or might be interested in that particular area. Is there a portal or is there a platform where all of these, excited young individuals with wonderful ideas, can engage with a wider group of industries and perhaps, the sort of things that you do here in the US, where you bring in venture capitalists or other pharma companies on campus and you say, here are a portfolio of ideas, what are you interested in? At an earlier stage. So these guys are still in the early stages of their career and probably don't have the breadth of contacts that you guys have. How does one do this, especially across the globe?
So my first interaction was a very good question. So there is something called Bangalore Bio. I started by for students, they charge 150 rupees to go to Bangalore Bio, students or postdocs. So I started from zero. I went to Bangalore Bio. I paid my 150 rupees and went and spent 10 days there. Went to all the booths, started talking to people. It was not the other way where venture capitalists come and say, I want this, right? It was the other way around in India still, but this is changing. ABLE has a forum that will allow you to do this. ABLE is a short form for Association of Biotechnology-Led Enterprises, which is a formal organization, which now is beginning to build some platforms to do this. BIRAC has as a government is beginning to build these platforms. CCamp has a very large extended network that is beginning to do this. And now there are 20 CCamps all over the country. They are beginning to do this. So you will have to just enter through one of these incubators or through ABLE to get to the network. But then you have to put the effort in the Indian context rather than the venture capitalists coming and bugging you the other way around. It's still early days. Risk capital in India is still very small, but that is changing very, very quickly.
Okay, also one quick last question in this regard. Is there a major cultural and professional difference, like a barrier between Indian and the diaspora, from Indian and from outside, that one needs to take care of while initiating this kind of collaboration? Like something that they should be careful of?
Just be open-minded, right? Just be open to ideas, suggestions. It's a two-way process. It's a two-way street, right? Maybe we can hear from Dinesh what he thinks in the team, right? He probably brings in a very different perspective. Dinesh.
Yeah,
Sure.
Dr. Dineshkumar.
Yeah, I think we make too much of this cultural difference. Yes, there are slight variations in the processes that we have and the way we approach it and things like that. But those are things learned on the job. So when you have a collaboration, however small it might be, it may not even be funded to start with. But then you learn through this process, and these processes and the speeds at which they operate are also evolving continuously. So that shouldn't become an issue for us to go forward. See, essentially, it's like a love marriage between the academic and the industry that you're talking about. And irrespective of whether they are in the same country or different countries. And that's the best approach to go for a love marriage. But there are many situations where that doesn't happen. So then an arranged marriage comes into place. And that's where these funding agencies, or let's say the government for that matter, comes in and pitches in and tries to make do a matchmaking there, and it works perfectly. And once that is set up, then they are on their own, the collaborators. And just about 1.5 years back, as part of the Prime Minister's office, we organized what is called as a Vaibhav conference. Probably a few of you might be aware of this. Vaibhav actually is an acronym which stands for Vaishvik Bharatiya Vaijnanik. That means the global Indian diaspora, essentially, who is into any of these STEM related work that they're doing, and how they can interact and contribute with us. And I headed the aerospace stream for that. And we had interactions over an entire month. The Prime Minister inaugurated that, and various ministries were brought into picture. And now the Government of India actually has a huge database of the diaspora, thanks to that event that we had. And they know when there are certain requirements, who to contact and how to contact, and then they take it forward from there. And so any industry which has certain requirements like that in India, through FICCI or any of these chambers of commerce that we have in industry that we have, they approach the Government of India, the appropriate ministries, and they are given access to the right part of the database to ensure that the right connections are made. So all of these are developing, and there are many websites, both of the venture capitalists on the one hand, who in this arranged marriage, I can think of in the analogy to be like a mother-in-law, dreaded and draconian, right? But only perhaps if you have not understood the person or the VC well enough. So once you establish that rapport, I think that's when things start happening. And yes, you're right. Even from the poll, we saw that the lack of information is an issue, but it's not as much as it used to be. There are many portals that are coming up. For example, internships. This is a Government of India portal, which actually AICTE has a portal on internships, apprenticeships, and things like that, where 1 crore students have registered, and almost 30,000 industries have registered on it, offering about 12 lakh internships. Now, these are for people who are not into love marriages, right? So they come into this arranged marriage kind of a scenario and benefit out of that. So it's just that I think meetings like what you have organized as part of Sci-ROI, it really helps in creating that awareness. See, it's not so difficult. If we just do a Google search, we could end up with these sites. But knowing it firsthand from a person whom you trust or your peer group really helps in taking it forward, probably at a greater pace.
Thank you, Dr. Dineshkumar. With this, I think we have talked enough about this, like initiating this kind of collaboration. So I'll move over to the next topic, and Abhijit will take over. But for the participants, you might be interested in having a look at the chat box. There are some useful information posted by Manali that can be useful for you. So over to you, Abhijit.
Thank you, Vashwati. If I'm audible. Great. So maybe we'll, steer the discussion a little bit in another direction of role of, funding agencies in sustaining or initiating such collaborations between industry and academia. So since Vasan has already took that rein in Indian Alliance, maybe I would start with him first. To ask, how has funding impacted the nature of cross-sector collaborative works? What kind of schemes have been started in last 10 years to support such collaborations in India? And it not necessarily has to be restricted to the India Alliance. Maybe from your expertise, it can be. I mean, I know there are some other funding agencies like the BIRAC and also DST are also equally involved in such collaborations. So maybe you can just give us some insights from those. Vasan?
Another great question, Avijit, in terms of the enablers, right? And we heard from Dinesh talking about how they play a very important role. So my limited experience, I'm not going to talk about the India Alliance perspective because that is a very different fabric altogether, primarily more towards supporting early career, intermediate or senior researchers, right? Plus the new scheme that is called Team Sense Grant enables an industrial partner, but it comes with a little bit of caveats in terms of what can be done. I'll primarily focus on, we're talking about this is a global platform. So I'm going to talk about global funders, right? Wellcome Trust, for example, really has this fantastic large-scale funding opportunities, which run for 3 to 5 years, which primarily puts up big questions out there and really it can only be solved if you have multiple players from both the parties, industry, academia, coming together. Similarly, Gates Foundation has funding for very high-risk projects where they come with a pilot phase, 18 months, they give you a grant. If successful, which they know success rate is probably less than 10%, then the ones which are found successful get funding up to $1 million to take it to the next phase. Similarly, maybe Rams can add in terms of BIRAC and other entities, how they're doing it. So definitely Gates Foundation, Wellcome Trust. The European Union has run this framework program. It's a huge architecture of running into millions of dollars over 5-year period, where they clearly want to see an idea moving into clinical development. So the need is, can ideas be translated? It could be a diagnostic, it could be a vaccine, it could be a drug. Primarily, this is all product oriented, right? Primarily, or something which can impact a policy. So let's remember that in the course of this 5 years of a partnership, the funders expect a lot of publications, definitely some tangible outcomes which can impact policy, existing policies, so they measure that. They also ingrain a lot of other features like diversity, inclusivity. How are you influencing and changing the local ecosystem? Again, there's a lot of features around where do you source material, how much of money stays within the country, how much can go abroad. So all this put together really makes it a win-win situation for all the partners. Yeah. So the big funders is what I will look at global, because you can, there are no geographical boundaries.
Thanks, Vasan. Dr. Rams, you would like to add?
Vasan pretty much summarized a lot of it, but I'll tell you the smaller funds, which is very specialized. HFSP is a very good funder, very big. They do a lot of work. Doris Duke Foundation, they fund, transnational collaborations and industry academic collaborations. I have been funded by a lot of what we call parent organizations. For example, I was funded by the Retinitis Pigmentosa Parent Society. They are parents who are interested in curing a disease, who want to fund industry and academia to work together to find problems. So foundations are very good things. Niche, right? So you know what you're working on. So today there is a foundation for almost everything that you can think of. There is not-for-profits. I already put one on the website, which is the Prime Minister's Fellowship Scheme. That's another very interesting scheme, but that's a little lower level for graduate students. I have had graduate students who went through this. So I think, I don't think today fellowships or funding to do industry academia collaborations is necessarily the issue. Most importantly, one of the things I have found is that I did this very successfully in India. All my students were funded for 2 years by some company or the other. And all my postdocs were funded for 1 year by a company or the other. And this is Bugworks funded a postdoc for me for 2 years, for example. They're not a big company, right? But they still funded a postdoc for 2 years just to establish collaborations. So this is a very growing trend. Don't think you have to go to Biocon or Zydus to do this. They are actually not really interested. Go to the smaller ones who want technology, who want your insights, who want your help. They're very generous, and it's the nice thing about this is I call this unattached money. It's not attached to a specific grant, and in the Indian context, government funding is the worst. It's good money, but it's terrible. It comes with writing UC, SOE, and you don't need to do this. And it's so nice. So talk to a lot of small companies. There's a lot of funding available. You're muted, Avijit.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you, Rams. I can see there are lots of information are already posted in the chat box by the panelists and also by Manali. So I request our audience to have a look, and maybe those useful information you can always copy paste into your notepad somewhere. So I would also like to hear from Dr. Dineshkumar, because he also has some active startup initiatives from his research lab with his alumni and the students. So what are the different resources, if you would like to add something on that, because your research area is a little different from our other two panelists. So maybe that would be more insightful.
Sure, Avijit. Essentially what we're talking about here is to see, first of all, because the topic for today is collaboration. We're all talking about collaboration, but there's a lot of work that we can do without collaboration as well. So, and that's where startups come into the picture, where you are seeing that there's a wonderful idea. I don't need to take it to the industry. Maybe I can sustain it myself, or with the kind of small funds that are accessible to me right away. And I could, instead of going to the very big generic funding sources, there could be some sector-specific funds or incubators, even incubators in the university, or incubators which are by big companies but spread across the world and things like that. So it's these kinds of things that I think can be accessed. So we should not go for collaboration just for the sake of collaboration. The idea is that do whatever you can do by yourself to the extent possible. So you have pushed the limit and established a kind of a reputation. Maybe you even come up with a prototype of what your idea is, and then more people will be interested. So when you go and talk to people, whether it's VCs or incubators, whoever, they are more interested because you have something on hand to show and to prove. That way, things become far more easy for you to negotiate. See, it's not just the money that you're getting, but what say they have in what you're doing and things like that. So when you have something that you know is working, you have done some market study as well to see where it will be applicable, how its acceptance could be, and things like that. It may not be too comprehensive to start with because of the limitation of funds and time and things like that, and resources that you might have. But yet, you push the limits and boundaries of what you can do as an individual or as a small group of individuals, and then you can take it from there with the collaborations.
Thanks, Dr. Dineshkumar. I mean, I think we have covered pretty much well about the grounds of funding resources, and not only it's limited to the Indian, but also some other foreign players also there. We'll have to just reach out, and appropriately Ram says that it not necessarily has to be the big or giant players. It can be the small ones as well. So with this, we'll move to the next topic, and Vashwati, it's over to you now.
Thanks, Abhijit. So we are in the last part of the panel discussion now. So here we'll focus on the role of academia and industry in grooming a next generation workforce. So I'd like to ask Dr. Dineshkumar, from your experience with your students to initiate startups, what are the best practices followed in academia and industry for grooming them? I mean, the next generation inventors. Yeah.
Yeah, Vaswati, that's a great question. Should be of great utility to a lot of people in the audience. See, the way we approach it is you initially, if the idea has come up from the university, most universities these days, not just the centrally funded technical institutions, but even many of the private colleges which are doing wonderful work, really going up in the NIRF rankings and things like that. All of them have established some kind of societies for innovation, development, incubation, and things like that. And they're interfacing their students and faculty with the outer world, because you just don't want to throw out an idea right up front outside. It usually gets lost. And so there is a secure kind of an environment where you can kind of incubate it, and it's used for the right reasons, this particular word, which has biological connotations, as you know. So essentially what you're trying to do is to get it up to a certain level, and then you can kind of open it up. So there's startups that my students have, they have in fact gone a step forward in applying for international awards. So you mentioned that in the introduction as well as part of the leadership team. So some of these awards that we have got, almost a dozen international awards, that builds up your reputation as well. So you're throwing open to juries which are part of your ecosystem in which you're working on. And if they have kind of recognized, you may or may not win, but at least just participating in them creates kind of a room for other people to know about you, and also for you to know what others, like your peers, other groups who are competing with you, what they're actually working on and things like that. And this kind of cross-field germination really helps. My PhD advisor at Georgia Tech, he used to attend talks in almost every department. And I used to wonder, I mean, his field is very different, but some of these meetings that you attend can always give you certain ideas from various other disciplines, and something that you are stuck up when to move forward. Others might be doing it on a regular basis, using a different approach, and it's just a question of adapting those approaches to your problems. So, whether it's a startup or any other thing that you're working on, it's good to be open to all of these things. We say open box, but actually there's no box itself. So you don't just need to think out of the box, but just open your eyes and see that there is no box. So then I think you have a way to move forward.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Dineshkumar. Dr. Vasan, do you want to add something to it?
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the question, right, in terms of how does academia industry groom the next level of leaders, right? So wherever I worked, we always have people, young scientists coming onto the bench, learning the nuances of how is it to work in an industry. Some of them who are really bright, we tell them, you know what, go abroad, get a PhD, and then come back. Be our brand ambassadors, right? So that's something which we do 2 to 3 years, create their curiosity, and then they go out asking some very specific questions. Go with a mission, do a PhD abroad, maybe do a postdoc, and you will see most often they'll come back saying, I want to come back and work here. So that clearly shows, the experience they have had. On top of it, for example, if you take Biocon, right? Biocon has tied up with one of the universities. I just can't recall the name now. It starts with KEG, I think, KEG, where they have actually created a program, a 6 months internship or a very structured, industrially driven program where graduates coming out of it can immediately find suitable opportunities in the industry. What we often see in the industry is people coming out of academic research or academic labs or straight out of college are not readily employable in terms of skill set, hands-on experience. That's why I touched upon during my introductory talk that hands-on skill is so important. Many people just get to do this only when they get into a job. So it's very important that there are companies doing this. There is CSR funding, corporate social responsibility funding, where they do really support individuals to get trained, create networks, opportunities, and many Indian companies have gone on to set up research institutions outside, and they also have fellowship programs. They bring someone here to spend a year in their industry or in their labs, learn something, contribute, and then go back. So as the other panelists have said, opportunities are plenty. Have an open mind. There is no box. There is no box. Like open mind. And it's just all about picking up those conversations and making those connections. And each one of us sitting in India know how exciting and how empowering it is to make those connections for people who are abroad and then trying to get them into the right place. So all of us here are very excited to make this connection. So please reach out. Social media is very strong. All of us are on LinkedIn, and as much as possible, we try to respond.
Thank you, Dr. Vasan.
I have a note of warning in this, okay? I work quite a bit with industry. The note of warning is that if you ask industry what the problem with education in India is, it's something that Vasan just described, that the students coming out of our academic programs cannot come to my company and hit the road running. So they're asking for skill sets. But academia has a different responsibility, which is to develop talent and not just skill set alone. It's often the fault of industry that they will, in their limited vision of wanting to run, they want skills rather than talent and are unwilling to. There are many companies which do that, but most companies don't think of this, at least in the Indian context. So as an academic, I want to keep the right balance between providing opportunities to work in industry as soon as they finish and developing a talent pool which can think differently, creatively, and be disruptive. So the note of warning is just don't get carried away only on the skill side. It's important to remember the other side of what academia has to do.
Great point, Rams.
Thank you
for strengthening that conversation. Yes, definitely. Again, it finally boils down to the requirement. And sometimes specifically for a skill, those things are very short-lived. Rather, as you said, we look for a talent pool who can be, leverage their knowledge, their strength can be leveraged, not just for a project, but for a portfolio of projects.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ramaswamy and Dr. Vasan and Dr. Dineshkumar for the answer. Now, the final question, one final question. These incubators, do they help in patent or IP management issues also?
I should maybe take the answer as the one who created an incubator.
Yeah, you should.
Yes, CCAMP has an IP cell, which helps you do IP. CCAMP also has a cell which says, okay, IP alone is not enough. If you want somebody to license the IP, you also have to convert your discovery, which you just IP'd, and make sure you take it to what we call innovation. That then becomes interesting to become a startup for some investor to come and invest in your startup, or a larger company to license it. So you have to think about that. And the third step is these incubators provides, there are schemes by which they can also help you get your initial funding to do the startup. And I mean, I'm simply talking from the bio side because that's what I know, and that's what CCAMP was set up is, to do all of the portfolios, help you with licensing, have IP, help you with crossing that path from going from discovery to innovation, and then helping you go to the next step. But it's a lot of work. It's just not money. It's a lot of hand-holding. That's one of the reasons, for example, we don't let companies like Bugworks leave out of CCAMP. People have always accused CCAMP, for example, of saying, why are Bugworks and C6 Energy still in CCAMP? You are supposed to help new startups. We just built more space because what these companies do, who have been there and made it, is provide the mentorship to the other younger people to also get the experience of how to go from one step to the other. So to answer your question, yes, most of the incubators do. There are some who don't, but majority do. But the quality is rather poor or average. I also want to say that, okay, be very careful because IP is about covering how broad it is, what you're covering and stuff like that. There's another thing that the company, that incubators do not do, which is do what is called freedom of operation, freedom to operate, FTO analysis. That's a separate thing. I don't want to discuss it. Vasan probably can talk more about it if he wants to, but that's not critical for filing an IP. But that's critical for starting a company.
Thank you, Dr. Ramaswamy. Asim, if you're here, can you also add something to it? Is Asim here?
Yeah, I'm very much here. I'm very much here. I think I didn't want to intrude because people have had more experience with India. But would you reframe where the question stands right now?
So this incubators such as CCAMP and NSRCL, so how do they deal with patent and IP management matters?
Yeah, so from the Indian perspective, it's hard for me to speak authoritatively. I think Rams and Vasan and Dinesh may have better thoughts. What I've seen in the US, of course, is by the time you get to an incubator, you have done what Rams has already talked about, an FTO. Can you really start a company? Is the market permissive? And you've essentially shielded your IP to some degree. You've protected it because even though we are talking about these rosy scenarios, it is a competitive world out there, right? And if someone sees that you have something, they may not trouble you in the beginning, right? They may see Novartis itself. And so I say this tongue in cheek because I know that Vasan was part of Novartis at one point, and the current head of Novartis is a former Khurana scholar. Head of NIBR is my first Khurana scholar. Anyway, so they also will allow things to go on, even if you've thought you've protected your IP, if you're not very careful, or if you're using IP from somewhere else, right? They'll let you develop it. And if there is a real product there and they see potential, they may come in and sue you and just completely demolish you and take your IP. So it's not all rosy. So that first step of figuring out, can you do this? Right? Is there freedom to operate? Is your IP robustly protected? and are you building value are important steps that are developed in at least US incubators. And from what little I've seen in terms of reviewing grants and talking to people, it's not as deeply considered in India. And this is a problem because once you start going global, as Vasan pointed out, and you start developing value, global players are not just global, even in India, players can be quite aggressive. So this is an important piece that needs to be developed. The other thing is sources for funding. Where do you get your money and what do you give in exchange for that money? Right? So that has to be considered to some degree when you get venture capital in, or you get partners in, or you get other people to buy in. What's the price of that? And to what degree can you develop a product? I mean, I don't want to go off on tangents. There are many, many components to your question. But I've watched over time Rams create C camps, right? This is when I was doing my sabbatical out there. He had already done this by that point, and then watching Taslim and company to take it to so many different places. So I think the ecosystem is developing, but I feel like the question you've raised is one that we will need to return to many times and continue to solve problems as we encounter them. There isn't a simple answer to your question, I'm sorry. And certainly I can't speak from what is happening in India at the moment. I'd invite my panelists, colleagues to add to anything that I may have left out or misstated. Rams, Vasan, Dinesh, anything?
I don't misstate anything. I think, sorry, Vasan, go ahead. I don't think I misstate anything, but I think I want to hear Vasan from the other side as to how well, Indians are very poor at protecting it, but I completely agree. Vasan, go ahead.
Yeah, once you move to the commercial space or potential commercial space, right, the stakes are very high. So it's recommended, suggested that you do a thorough due diligence. It's like buying a house, right? You're going to put in your lifetime investment in buying a house. Never get bought over or sold over by what the salesperson is doing. You go and do your own homework. A lot of people resort to taking a bank loan where they do their own thorough analysis and look at the property details and everything, and it's always nice to go for an independent legal opinion. So it's important that if you really have a bright idea, by talking to your mentors and the network, you know that this is something which is really potentially going to strike gold. It's important to really invest money in a very, very thorough due diligence, preferably within India, or if you have someone else outside the country, go for it. Because that money spent is really worth it, and that protects you for 5 years, 10 years, the business interest. So it's very important that it takes it to another league altogether. Competing at the district level versus going into Olympics, the stage is very different. Anything commercial, it's serious money. It comes with very, very thorough due diligence.
Thank you, Dr. Vasan. So with this, we will conclude the panel discussion now because we are running out of time. If the audience, anyone has specific questions, just save it for the breakout rooms because we now have to head to the breakout rooms. Abhijit?
Yeah, thank you, Vashwati. I mean, I really, want to give a wholehearted thanks to all of our panelists, including Asim. I think it was a really engaging and wonderful discussion. Lots of things to learn, and I can see it's a very conducive environment in India, although we do have our own challenges and limitations, but sky is the limit because we are still growing up and in that space, and we can see that lots of companies and institutes are very welcoming and encouraging for such collaborative ecosystems in India. So with that, I want to thank all of our panelists today. Before we move on to our breakout room where all of our attendees can, get the opportunity to speak to one-on-one, and I think that is the more interesting part of such webinars. You have the opportunity to discuss your own questions. If some of the questions were unanswered in the mailbox, in the chat box, probably you get the chance now to interact with our panelists directly. So over to you, Manali.
Thank you, Abhijit. So I have already opened the breakout rooms. So I'll just share my screen. So we have individual breakout rooms for our panelists. So may I request our panelists to go to your own breakout room if you see that, or I can help you with that. And the attendees can also choose whichever breakout room you want to go to. Just click next to that name. You will see a join button coming up and just click on that.
Let me thank the Sci-ROI team for putting this wonderful panel together. This is just absolutely wonderful. And I learned a lot listening to our panelists, and I really am enjoying all the information that is coming up in questions, via questions in the chat box. We would like to, as at Sci-ROI, collect all this and try and help build a portal. And I would invite the panelists to participate in this and engage, help us create the portal or a platform where Sci-ROI members and other members of the diaspora can engage industry and like-minded individuals in India. Thank you.
Absolutely, a great opportunity. Thank you, everyone. Again, it's just a tagline what Ram used. You come back to India, you can address the problem of 5 billion people, right? You have a tremendous opportunity to take care of, address health issues, health challenges, not only for India, but for the globe. So.
I'd like to thank Alap, Kshirsagar, Avijit, Baswati, Ananya, Manali, Ratnamala, and all the other high energy enthusiasts in the Sci-ROI leadership team, including, of course, its founder, Dr. Asim Ansari, all of whom I got to meet for the first time, for inviting me and hosting me as a part of this esteemed panel, along with, of course, the illustrious Vasan and the effervescent Rams. Both of whom also I got introduced just this week too. So it was a wonderful topic discussing this with you. I look forward to engaging with many of you in the future in different circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dineshkumar. I'm going to assign both Dr. Vasan and you to your own rooms. So if you can,
yes, please.
Just click on the join button that's coming up.